So greetings from Pennsylvania once again. We're back here in my home turf of southeastern Pennsylvania, Berks, Lebanon counties. Just got back from a trip up to northeastern Pennsylvania, did quite a bit of stuff, but now we're back home. Spent the last couple of days editing videos, but here we are, kind of in an old cemetery. I've filmed here before. I have some ancestors buried here, but doing a little bit something different today. Some time ago, a book was sent to me. It's called Understanding Cemetery Symbols. I'll show you a little more detail in a moment, but it talks about some of the different monuments and symbolism that you see on the tombstones. Something that you don't always think about. Like sometimes you see, like there's one up here that has like a skull and crossbones on it. Some have like a sheep or tree branches, different types of flower buds and wreaths. It's interesting that they all have different meanings that can tell you stuff about the person who's buried there. So we're gonna take a little walk. We're here at the Tophaken, what is this, the Tophaken Trinity Church here, I think, near the border of Lebanon and Berks County. So we're in the old cemetery right now, but there's a newer cemetery on the other side of the road too. So we're gonna walk around, try to find some different symbols and see what they mean. So here's the old cemetery. It's got this cool old stone wall around it. I think up that way some of my ancestors are buried from the Revolutionary War era. But yeah, this is the book though. It's called Understanding Cemetery Symbols, a field guide for historic graveyards. I get the name of the author down there. Because I know for me personally, I'm guilty at sometimes missing the symbols. Like check this one right out here. I'm looking for names and dates a lot of times if you watch my videos. I'm not always paying attention to these. Like what is that right there? We'll talk about that one in a moment. I believe that's an angel, because this is a much older tombstone. There's one up here that has a heart on it. There's hearts. These are older, so what do these hearts mean, you know? A couple of them. I think there's one back here that has a skull and crossbones on it too. Yeah, right up here's one. It has a creepy skull on it. This is a much older tombstone. Skull and even the writing on here. Yeah, there's a date down there, 1745. I think that's when they died. Yeah, so what does a symbol like this mean? Why is there a skull on this tombstone? Nowadays we think of a skull like this being something evil, but back then it necessarily wasn't something evil. The skull just kind of represented like the certainty of death. It doesn't necessarily mean that the person buried here was someone evil. It's just reminding us all that death comes for everybody. That's what the skull means. It's kind of changed meaning today. You know, skulls kind of, every time you see a skull, you think of Halloween and evil, spooky. Not necessarily what it meant back then. Yeah, because I remember visiting this cemetery many years ago when I was still in college, and I saw these like skulls on these tombstones. I thought it meant, you know, that the people buried here, there's something evil about them, and that's not the case. It's just, like I said, the inevitability of death is what these skulls just represent. It's kind of a reminder. But there's that one up here that had the wings. Let's go find that one again, because that means something different. Yeah, so here's this one again with like the crudely looking face, and these are wings on the side. So what does this represent? It's not necessarily an angel. It represents something just a little bit different. Yes, the symbolism here, I should mention too that this style tombstone is a little bit later than the one we were just at with just the simple skull. They get a little bit more elaborate as time goes on, but this simply represents the soul's flight to heaven. This isn't necessarily an angel, it's representing the soul of the individual taking flight to heaven after death. That's what this symbol can mean. And up here are the two that have hearts once again. This one has a heart, that one, and the one behind it. So hearts, I mean, in the most basic definition, a heart on a tombstone means love and devotion, but depending on what type of heart it is, it can mean different things. So like I said, there are a few different meanings for hearts. I mean, the basic one just means love and devotion, but there are some different, depending on how the heart is stylized. Like if the heart is a bleeding heart, when you see a heart that appears to be bleeding, it symbolizes the suffering and torment of Christ, especially if the person that's buried here is a religious person. A flaming heart is symbolic of a human soul burning with religious zeal. Heart held in hands. When you see a heart gently cradled in a pair of hands, it stands for love and piety. The heart is covered with ivy. Love combined with enduring friendship and faithfulness. Two hearts joined together. This is a common symbol for two hearts joined together by marriage. So probably like a joint grave or something like that. A heart with thorns. Catholic graves sometimes feature a heart surrounded by thorns and topped with a cross called the Sacred Heart. This image is meant to remind the devout how Christ died for their sins. A heart pierced by a sword. This is another Catholic symbol which is known as the Immaculate Heart of Mary. As a symbol, it stands for devotion, sorrow, and repentance. So these hearts here don't seem to have any of that symbolism, although I did, as I'm looking, this one has 3 dots on either side, and so does that one. Like there's these 3 dots on either side, but the one behind them only has 1 dot on each side. You know, I see that? 1 and 1. Kind of wonder if that means something. Not really sure offhand. You know, you can say so in the comments. Yeah, and here's another tombstone with a heart. A little bit different than the others, but it also has these flowers on either side. Flowers have quite a few different meanings on tombstones. There's a whole chapter here in this book on flowers, so I'm going to take a quick look to see if I can identify what kind of flower that is. So I couldn't find an exact picture of this type of flower in the book, but generally speaking, flowers on a tombstone represent the reality of life's fleeting beauty. Because you think about flowers don't last all that long. You know, the bud opens, they bloom beautifully for a while, and then they quickly fade away, and then they're gone. Which, sadly enough, is an accurate depiction of life. You know, you're as a bud, you're that little baby, and you quickly bloom into an adulthood. You know, the beauty of life, and then as you get old, you fade pretty quickly, and then just like that, it's gone. So it is a distinct reminder of the reality of life. So here's another interesting one. Check this out. It's just down from the one we looked at earlier with like the face of the wings. That was supposed to represent the soul taking flight. This probably one has a similar symbol to it here, idea. More likely this is not an angel, but look, check out the face. You know, I just never really stopped to really look at some of these. Like I said before, I'm always kind of focusing on the dates and stuff. Well, this one's terribly hard to read. It's like a little, almost like a bell underneath. Flower. It looks like a pine cone. I think a pine cone has a symbolism to it as well. But let me get back to you on that. Yes, and once again, this is probably another, what they call a soul effigy, like the other one up there. This represents the soul's flight to heaven. It's probably not actually an angel. Although, I guess it could be as well. But then the pine cones, there's one up here in the middle of this flower, and there's actually 2 pine cones on either side. And interestingly enough, since pine trees stay green all year round, unlike other trees that lose their leaves, the pine cones are a sign of immortality. In other words, like how the pine trees stay green even when winter comes. Like other trees, the leaves fall off and die. But the pine tree doesn't. So it's a symbol of immortality. So you have the soul's flight to heaven, and then the pine cones kind of represent that immortality of living forever up in heaven. Alright, let's keep looking for more symbols. Some of these it's kind of hard to see what the symbol is even. Like what's this right here? Can't really tell, it's kind of worn away. Almost looks like an acorn up there. Actually, is that an acorn? Let me quick look that up. I think I remember seeing that in a book. That looks like an acorn. Alright, so I'm not entirely sure. The more I look at it, maybe it doesn't look like an acorn. If it was an acorn, it's representing the oak tree. How just like a little acorn can produce a mighty oak tree. Even though those are not oak trees, those are sycamore trees. So it's the idea of how greatness can come from a humble beginning. So if that is an acorn, that's what it represents. It almost looks like, if it's a bud, like a bud to a flower, that means it's a young child, but this one's not a young child. You have 1799 to 1850, so this person's about 51 years old, so that's not a young child. But anyway, but some of these are a little bit hard. These are old, so a little bit hard to make out. You can let me know what you think. So I found another one with that same symbol. So I'm going to try and look in the book a little more carefully, see what's going on here. If I can discover what this means. Alright, another quick glance through the book. I couldn't really find a symbol that looked exactly like that, so I'm not sure exactly what that is, to be honest. If you know, like I might, when I get home, I'll probably look it up on the internet to see if I can find, but there's a heart below it too, but yeah, not quite sure what's going on there. I'll give you another closer look. Yeah, there you go. Once again, not sure what that means. Like there's a heart down below it. That's all covered in flowers. And the one next to it has the same design. And there was that other one we looked at too that had this same thing. Oh, I see one back there. They have that same design. So I wonder what this, it's a common design here in this cemetery. I wonder what it is. Because that one has it, that's one we were looking at. This one right here has the same design. And then back here, these two have the same thing as well. So what exactly is it? Very similar, slightly different on each one, kind of, but hey, but if you know what it is, go ahead and let me know in the comments or what you think it might be. It's a learning experience for me as well, just kind of learning as I make this video here today. I think we're going to head to the other side of the road. There's more modern cemeteries over there. We'll see what we can find. Now, I might head to another old cemetery too that has some interesting looking tombstones. But let's head across the way first, see what we can find over there. Yeah, more modern stuff, but I'm seeing a huge urn up there. Up there it looks like an angel holding an urn. I see one with a book here. I see one with some Masonic symbols. Yeah, let's check out the book one here first. Because depending on what the book looks like, it tells you different things about the person. Alright, so this is an open book, and that does mean something. If you look at his dates, 1823 to 1849, he didn't live all that terribly long, kind of cut off, I guess you could say, at the fullness of life, and that's depicted in the symbol right there. Yeah, so a book can mean different things. A closed book may mean a long life lived to the last page. An open book, on the other hand, in this case, the person's life was cut short before they reached the last page. And indeed, this person's years show that they died younger. They weren't a child anymore. An open book with a draped cloth kind of represents the same thing. The cloth represents the veil of death, cutting life short before the final page was revealed. Also, open book with writing, which this one has too, can also just refer to the book of life as well. I find it interesting though that the symbol here, like the open book representing life being cut short before it reaches final stage or final page, matches the idea. You know, their dates show that they died in their 20s at some point, so they never reached that final chapter of their life. All right, so here's a larger monument with an urn at the top. I did point out there was one back. Oh yeah, right up there's a larger one with there's an angel holding an urn. So let's see, what does the urn represent? So these days when you see an urn, you think more of cremation. You know, you have your loved one cremated, they give you the ashes in an urn. But in this case, in the older times, as an airplane flies overhead, always happens when you film, it just refers to more to the, it comes from more of the Greek style, Victorian era. In the Victorian era, they borrowed a lot from the Greek styles. And it just refers to the soul or the body being reduced to its barest elements before the soul takes flight to heaven. That's kind of what happens. You know, your soul does, I mean not your soul, but your body does get reduced back to dust in a way that represents the urn in a way. And here's another interesting one. I guess this is an urn too, but it's covered with a veil. The veil often refers to death, you know, the veil of death covering that urn. Here's another urn, slightly different style, top there. And then here's the one that's not an angel. From back in parking lot, it looked like there's an angel surrounding that one, but that one has a veil and a wreath around it. Let me zoom in for you a little bit there. Yeah, I thought that veil looked like an angel from further back, but it's not. Well, I'll read a little more about the urn for you. It deals with ones that had the drapery on top. Yeah, even so, these Greek-style urns are used to symbolically represent the idea of the mortal body being reduced to its basic elements as the soul ascends to heaven. That's kind of what I said earlier. But here we go, a draped urn. That's what these little, I called it like a veil. A draped urn, if the cloth has a fringe, it represents the veil between life and death. If there is no fringe, then it represents the earthly garments being shed as the deceased moves from this world to the next. And then an urn with a wreath, which the one up there had the garment and the wreath, A wreath symbolizes mourning and eternal remembrance. Yes, that one up there has the garment, or the drape, and the wreath. That's interesting. Well, let's walk around a little bit more. I know there was one down there with the Masonic symbol on it. Oh cool, there's one of the Amish horse and buggies driving by over there. We are in that area. You can see it on the road there. Alright, let's see what else we can discover here. Alright, check it out. We have hands with the finger pointing upwards. I think you can probably figure out what that means. Yeah, when you see a hand with the finger pointing upward, it means that the deceased has gone to heaven. That's what that's supposed to say. So here's a sad one. This is just a child. You can tell by the size of the tombstone. Aged. I think it says 1 year down there. It's not very old at all. But it's a flower bud. Notice the flower isn't even in bloom. So this is representing that this child was cut off, you know, before they even reached bloom, full bloom of adulthood. That's what that means. You just see just the bud. So like that's kind of a sad one. Yeah, so here's the Masonic symbol. Mason G. I'm not sure what the G stands for offhand. I'm sure someone in the comments will let me know in the comments, but there you go. Let's walk around a little bit more. I'll probably just do this cemetery today. It's heating up a little bit and we're finding quite a bit here. Alright, so here are some more hands. Got two tombstones here with the handshake. I just read what the book has to say about this. There's actually a lot going on here. Not just two people shaking hands, but you can tell because there's different types of handshakes on these tombstones. So pay attention to the one hand is grasped firmly, and the other one is just limp in the other person's hand. And they also have the finger extending out here. Same with this one over here. That means something as well. Alright, handshakes. When you see a handshake on a grave marker, try to figure out the gender of those depicted. Well, we have a husband and wife here. If it's two males, then the handshake likely stands for fraternal brotherhood, which this one does not because, well, I'll explain later. The one hand is kind of limp. Handshakes can simply stand for God or other loved ones welcoming the new soul to heaven. Handshakes often depict the limp fingers of the deceased firmly gripped by relative. That's what you're seeing here. One hand is firmly grasping, the other one's limp. We'll look at this in a moment again. The limp fingers of the deceased, handshakes often depict the limp fingers of the deceased firmly gripped by relative, angelic being, or perhaps God himself. If the gender is shown is obviously male or female, it's most likely a marital handshake. That's the case of these up here. Meant to show that the deceased were married. Here we go. When one finger is extended, which is up there, it means that the deceased was a member of the Freemasons. There you go. And that's what you have here. You have the finger extended. So this couple were Freemasons, and the limp hand is the deceased, and this is the one grasping it is probably the loved one, or like in some cases represents an angel or God himself. But since they're married, it probably represents the loved one. So that's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting what you can learn from just looking at the little details on these symbols. You see the hands shake, you know, that's one thing, but then you notice you gotta look for those little things like that. Just one little finger extended beyond tells you one more little thing about the people that are buried here. There's lots of symbolism in these graveyards, cemeteries. All right. So there's a symbol in particular that I'm looking for. There are other symbols. I'm not showing everything in this video. We'll save some for others. I kind of like this. The one I'm looking for is kind of a sad symbol, but we'll see if we can find it. I remember seeing it in quite a few other cemeteries. But if you're enjoying this type of video, let me know in the comments. I find myself enjoying making this. I always enjoy walking around cemeteries. Some people find that strange, but I find it's just a historical, and then just adds a whole nother element to it as well, learning about the people. But anyway, what I'm looking for is a lamb. Sometimes there's an image of a lamb, but a lot of times there's a carved, like, not just a engraved image of a lamb, but a carved image of the lamb on top. And that lamb represents a child as well. Because a lamb is just a young sheep. So that young sheep represents a young child that never reached adulthood. So I remember seeing those on quite a few cemeteries, grave markers, but not seen any here though. Yeah, here's a more recent burial. Franklin Winston in 2022. There's a full can of Coke down there. It's pretty faded, so Frank must have liked Coke. I mean, that has its own symbolism in a way, on a much more personal level. It's kind of cool though in its own way. Yeah, here's another one with that kind of open book style. But it's more like an open scroll. It also has the flower but up top, because she only lived to be 11 years old, so it kind of has that same meaning, cut off in the, the flower before she reached adulthood. And over here is more of these draperies or veils. This one has, I guess, the fringe on it, representing the boundary between life and death. They both have. That's kind of a cool look. The drape, the veil over it. But I think that'll be it for me today. It's starting to heat up out here in the sun. But I had fun doing this. I'm learning a lot myself. Like, I'm just kind of researching as I'm walking around here, looking these things up. So it adds a whole new dimension to doing this. Like I said, a lot of I go to a lot of cemeteries in my videos, when a lot of times I'm looking for historical information, certain people and dates, things like that, and not really paying attention to the symbolism of these markers. But so this is kind of this is educational and eye-opener for me as well. And if you want to add to any of the things I found today, some extra symbolism or things that you know yourself, by all means go ahead and do so in the comments down below. Like I said, we haven't looked at every symbol that's out here. We'll save some, because there's no lack of cemeteries to visit too. So like I said, that'll be it then, folks. Like I said, if you like this kind of video, let me know in the comments. I'll probably make more regardless, but as always, thanks for coming along, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one, wherever that may be.